So 32 of the Palmetto Politics podcast. Today it's just going to be me. John unfortunately had a family member pass away and is away with his wife in New York City. So we certainly want to send out prayers and condolences to John and his family. But today we are going to be joined by someone very special and someone that I think everyone needs to hear from and understand exactly what's going on with our election processes here in South Carolina. A lot of us have heard and talked ourselves about our concerns about the computer systems, the ES&S machines we have here in South Carolina being hackable or in some way being able to be compromised during the election process or certainly after the election process. So that begs the question of, well, if we go back to paper ballots, how does that happen? How do we make that transition? And is that really the best thing for us to do? So we have Laura Scharr here today from South Carolina Safe Elections. And so she's going to talk to us a little bit about why we need to go back. How do we make that turn? So let's welcome to the show. Good
Hi
morning,
there. Thank you
Laura.
so much. Good morning. Thanks for having me, Shannon.
Yes. And I hope I pronounced that last name right. It is Scharr.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Laura, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your area is in dealing with the election.
Yeah, so I'm just a regular person, just like a lot of people out there. And after what happened in the 2020 election, I just became so curious about our whole system here in South Carolina, because even though Trump won and we're a red state, I still felt like there were so many issues across the nation with all of the machines. And of course, we have ES&S here in South
Right.
Carolina, that it just needed to be looked at. And so I'm big on, I don't call myself an activist at all. I'm big on saying that our group, and really I represent the team, because there's a group of people across the state that work on this, and they're very tireless, and they care so much about our elections. And we all are putting our own time and our own dime into this. So we are totally grassroots. And we just want to analyze. So I call myself more of a data gatherer and an analyst, because we're just trying to figure out what happened. We're trying to explore the process, understand what's going on with not just the machines, but the voter rolls and the
Mhm.
process itself, and understand it better. And of course, the more we looked into it, the more issues we found. And that's not to say that we're claiming our state is fraudulent or anything. It's just that the system by design is
Mhm.
just very messy and complicated. There's lots of people, there's lots of things involved, and it breeds complexity, breeds potential errors, right? And also the potential for malfeasance.
Right. Right. Yeah, I know. I think I discussed with you offset Michael Covert, who ran for
Mhm.
county council, and he and his
Yeah.
wife having gone in early to vote, and his experience was that he wasn't on the ballot. And when he confronted the folks there, they made a phone call, and some gentleman, 40 minutes away, he's talking, and then, Mike said the next thing he knew, the lady said, "Oh yeah, it's all fixed." And he said, "What do you mean it's all fixed?" And he said, "Oh well, yeah, he went into your machine and your wife's machine and he fixed it." And he said, "Wait a minute, they're not connected to the internet." So if they're not connected to the internet, how did this guy get in there and fix it?
Yeah.
Uh, so
Well,
yeah.
yeah. So they are connected. Like the actual, when they register, you register in, and there's what's called poll pads. So
Mhm,
they're made by ES&S, and so they have all the information about the voter. You go in and you show your ID, you register,
mhm,
and it should know what district you're in. And so
mhm.
it does connect to the county. They're constantly giving updates and such. So I think that's what happened, was they probably they realized that he had been redistricted, right?
Right.
And
As
so
as was myself. Yeah.
right. So that whole week during early voting, and this was, I think, at the end of the 2-week period that he was in there, that's when he went that Friday. That was wrong that entire time. So think
Yes.
of all the votes that he
All the votes
potentially
he
lost.
didn't get.
And that was due to a programming error because the redistricting. So that just is an illustration
Yeah.
of kind of that messy process, where if you're not really making sure that all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, there are going to be issues. And this poor guy, he was disenfranchised. And they fixed it, but really, did they fix it in the end? The error had
Yeah.
already been there for 2 weeks. So
Right. And that's I guess that's the point that's lost to everybody because for 2 weeks, whatever a number of people came out to vote, they were because neither candidate, they just lost their voice in deciding who was going to be their county council representative. So that's
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah, and I don't like the whole idea of early voting. And people are like, "Oh, it's so convenient. We can go in and we can do early voting." And listen, do you want convenience or do you want accuracy? Do you want convenience or do you want to minimize the potential for fraud? If we can somehow get those early results, and one of the bills actually that they're trying to institute is where they can upload those early results to the electionware computers at the county level
Mhm.
early, like 7 a.m. on election day. Well, we don't want that. That means potentially, because we
Yeah.
know these computers can be infiltrated, someone's
Mhm.
getting those results early. And
Early.
that's my fear anyway with early resulting, that somehow there's messages from the either ballot marking devices or the tabulators or whatever that's somehow getting to people who could potentially get that information and finesse the election. It's just a potential. I'm not saying that's the
Yeah.
case, but we want to minimize any potential for fraud. And actually, yesterday was a very
Mhm.
seminal moment because they issued what's called the Halderman report. And the Halderman report was a
Mhm.
huge study that was done by Alex Halderman, and it was on the Georgia machines. Now they're Dominion, but people have to
Mhm.
realize that this is not just a Dominion problem. It's a
Right.
problem across all the machines because they're very, very similar architecture that was
Right.
based on kind of the same, template, the same foundation. So at any rate, he found that these machines can be infiltrated in many ways, and I highly recommend people read that.
Yeah, I know that, as you said, that's been the concern, and of course Arizona has been sort of the
Yeah,
hotbed of questions about electronic voting and computer voting and everything else. But I that here in South Carolina, just because we have ES&S machines does not mean that we have escaped any mistakes, or that there won't be future problems.
that
Now,
is
where I
correct.
differ with you just a little bit on the early voting is I do think it doesn't need to be 2 weeks. I would like to see it just be 1 week prior, to put some legislation in place that says, under the strictest of confidence, you cannot release these vote outcomes until the polls close on the following Tuesday. In my mind, it should be Monday through Saturday, the week before election, no Sunday, no Monday, and then everybody Tuesday. And I hope that would minimize how many people have to have mailing. Mail in, if you compare the two, mail in balloting is way more susceptible to fraud than in person early voting. But I don't think that we need to have it for I think some states even had it for a month. That's ridiculous. A
Yeah,
week
I would
prior
like
is
to see
plenty.
one day. I want to see like a holiday. So most people are off from
Yeah,
work.
I agree.
This is
Yeah.
how they do it in Europe, actually. They do it in
Yep.
France.
Yep.
In France, they actually do it on a Sunday. Everybody comes in on Sunday. They vote on paper, and there's
Yep.
no mail-in ballots, and they get it counted that day, and they're
Yeah.
able to do it. And actually, a lot of European countries are doing that now because they realize the potential for fraud. And you're right. What most people don't understand, one area where we do it well, one area that I think we figured out in South Carolina is we don't do that universal mail-in voting. So
Right.
a number of states, particularly in the West, will mail all of their registered voters ballots. Talk about the potential for fraud. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, that's where you get the heavy ballot harvesting that occurs, and
Exactly.
you get the 100% voter response from your
Yeah.
nursing homes. Now, my grandmother was in a nursing home for a number, for about I'd say about 16 months before she passed away, and we were up there constantly, and there were multiple people there who were just completely, they were not with it.
Yeah.
Um, and so imagine they're getting a ballot, somebody's hijacking that ballot and voting, and they're not even mentally, and they've proven this. They've gone out and
I
proven,
know.
multiple people have said, look, my mother or my father, they were complete, they've got Alzheimer's. There's no way they could have voted. And certainly if they had voted, they wouldn't have voted Democrat because they were lifelong Republican, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. So, and nothing gets done. And so I
It's
don't really know
sad.
how you adjudicate that. It's very frustrating, but
Well,
I was,
what
I
we
was very
found
intrigued.
too. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we also found through our canvassing efforts that there were multiple dead people who were voting in South Carolina. And we thoroughly researched these people. We actually looked at their obituaries. We had copies of their obituaries. We had their date of death, their date of birth, their date last voted, and people were voting who were dead. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that to me is just the worst sort of fraud. It's very disconcerting when you see that.
Well, I was certainly, my father passed passed away September, and he was a staunch Trump supporter. And so I will be very diligent in finding out whether or not my father votes in this next election, and woe be unto those if he does, because there's going to be some major blowback if that happens.
Yes.
Especially if he doesn't vote Republican, manages to convert himself to a rat, that's going to be a major problem. But so a lot of folks have said, well, there's no way, there's too many people, it's too difficult. How do we go back to paper ballots? And gosh, the reason we left paper ballots and went to computer, Laura, is because people were stuffing the ballot boxes with, copied ballots. So how from happening to allow it to return?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say there's kind of a false sense of security right now with our current system because people call it a paper ballot verification system. You can verify that you can look at your paper ballot because right now the system is you register, but it's through the e-poll book, right? And then it spits out a ballot. Now, when that ballot spits out, it's a blank ballot they put in the printer. When it spits out, all it has up top are two barcodes, your precinct and your ballot style. So your ballot style is based on your actual address, and it'll determine the races that are going to be coming up on the ballot marking device, which is the express vote machine. So this is why Mike Covert, his ballot style was wrong because it had the wrong.
Yeah, it had him in the wrong district.
So you then go over to the ballot marking device, that express vote machine, and you select who you're going to vote for, your races. Now, then the machine prints out that ballot. Now, people call that a paper ballot. I try not to. It's a coded ballot because when that ballot then prints out after you've select major selections, and by the way, some people were finding glitches in the midterms and primaries where they would hit, and they'd have to hit it like up to 12 times before it would switch to the right candidate. It would flip to a different candidate. That was another problem we found. Yeah, so anyway, it then prints out your choices. Now, here's the problem. Most people do not check their ballot. And they've actually done studies where they've said, hey, they've looked at people and they purposely put, this was a study. So it was like done by it. This was the same, I think Halderman did it, same guy. And he put some errors in that ballot. And the 93% of the people, 93% of the errors were not found.
Wow.
So people just aren't checking the ballot. And even if they are, they're not finding the errors. But here's the other problem. So it prints out, okay, this is who I voted for. So you can look at it. But it also prints out barcodes. So you have your precinct barcode, you have your ballot style barcode, and you have all the people, your selections are barcodes.
Right.
When you then take that ballot and put it in the tabulator, which mostly is a DS200 machine, it's an ES&S machine. It's reading the barcodes.
Right.
So how do you know that the program in that machine actually has the correct barcode that's interpreting your vote? You don't.
You're right. You don't. There's no way.
There's no way you know that. So this is why we have our lawsuit to get the cast vote record, because we want to be able to look at when that gets scanned, it generates a cast vote record. And it looks at the ballot image and it takes the information from that ballot image and it puts it on a record to say, okay, this is what that particular person voted for, but it doesn't identify the person. I want to make that clear. There's no way, because there's no personally identifiable information on that ballot.
Right.
So really the system that we have right now where we're checking our paper ballot is not really, it doesn't really inspire confidence from my standpoint. Now, the other thing is at the end of the day, they've got a poll tape they put at the door that says, here's your total vote for the precinct. But we don't know how those votes changed over time. That's the cast vote record, which is why we're suing right now 8 counties and the Election Commission to gain access to that. So we don't like that system because it's not transparent. So our South Carolina Constitution says, so I'm setting up the paper ballot, why we need paper ballots. Sure. The South Carolina Constitution says, and this is Article 2, Section 1, that you must, that all the voters, all selection, Article 2, Section 1 states, all elections by the people shall be by secret ballot, but the ballots shall not be counted in secret. So my question to you, Shannon, is do you think that your ballot is being counted in secret? Or is it in
Yes.
public? Well,
Yeah,
of
it's
course
definitely
it's
counted
being
as
counted.
secret
It's
because we
totally
don't know.
counted. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that black box, that tabulator is going,
Yeah.
we can't see how it's being counted. And we're saying, hey
Mhm.
guys, let us know how it's being counted. They're going, talk to the hand. Look, you got a poll tape. Look at the total amount. So I try to tell people, well, if I want to audit a bank account for suspicious activity, do I look at the total balance of that bank account and go, okay, it's good. It's got $1 million in there. No,
Mhm.
you look at the flows of money over time
Yeah,
to see if
the
there's
deposit
right.
and the withdrawals, yeah.
Yeah. So that's why we're looking for the cast vote records. Now, in an ideal world, we say let's get rid of all the electronics
Mhm.
and let's go to a paper ballot system. That is completely transparent. We can see how it's being counted. Now, how does that work? There are two systems that I know of right now that are being proposed in the United States. There's
Mhm.
one by Linda Rance, who's out of Missouri, who's done an incredible amount of work. And then there's another one that is, which I find fascinating, which I kind of prefer, that is being right now demonstrated all over Texas by a Democrat and a Republican who are living in an RV
Hmm.
and they're traveling all around Texas to demonstrate this to counties in Texas.
Wow. I
It
like it.
is fascinating. And if anybody wants to see it, it's at it's called Mock County TX for
Mhm.
Texas dot US. And they have videos of exactly how this works. And they have set up a system where they've got a number of counters sitting at tables. They have little so it's human counters, right? You have people
Whatever, give me that again, it's mock give me
Mock
that name one. Uh-huh.
MOCK
Mhm.
County TX dot US. And you probably want to put that link. So, and then you just go to election results. There's a little link for at the top that says election results. Press on that and it'll show a demonstration of the system. So what they do is they have the people there and they're they're calling it out. They are pressing a little button that basically is just a counter. It's not, there's
Mhm.
no electronics really. It's just a counter
Right.
and it's advancing the number. They had 20 races on the paper and there's 250 ballots.
Wow.
And they are able to count these 20 races of 250 ballots in approximately an hour.
Well, that's a whole lot better than days.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that's kind of cool is they have a camera mounted on top. So
Mhm.
not and so you're also getting the audio.
Mhm.
So you're seeing the actual ballot as it's going by. You're hearing the person call it out and you're watching them advance the counter.
Yeah.
And then what have you got? You've got an instant
Right.
replay.
Absolutely.
So if
Yeah.
anyone questions what's happening, you can now go to the instant replay and go, okay, let's make sure it's that. So
Right.
it's very highly documented. It's highly transparent. And so, no big deal. And
Yeah.
so I think that we make what I hear, like, so most of the people, when I talk to them in my presentations, are like, yes, let's go to paper ballots. There's always a
Mhm.
couple people in the crowd that are like, and oddly enough, they tend to be older. And I don't want
Mhm.
to go back to the paper ballots, or it's going to take too long. And what about fraud and blah, 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 blah. But you got to realize the last time we had paper ballots, we didn't even have really good video cameras. We didn't have good technology.
Right.
It was just different. So we can have really high resolution cameras now that can capture that. We can make sure that we have a system that just makes sense, right? And that's
Right.
super transparent. And so so let's say you have about, by law in South Carolina, each precinct is only supposed to have a maximum of 1,500 um, registered voters. And so what we need to do is ensure that our precincts are small. Okay.
Right.
And then what we need to do is let's say you have 65%. So I'm just doing the numbers now. Let's say a typical large election, general election, is going to have about 65% turnout, and that's really maximum. That gives you about 1,000 people who are coming into
Mhm.
that precinct that you need to count.
Right.
That's 4 hours. That's 4
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is some of these counties would maybe start counting early, like as the
Mhm.
votes are coming in, but they're sitting there at the precinct. They're not reporting the results. They're just kind of tallying and tallying, just like a tabulator would, right? But it's not, transparent to us. I prefer people starting at 7 p.m. when the polls close. But even then, that means you're done at 11. And when they say
Right.
done, they mean sealed with the proper documentation, like everything, it's ready to go. It's not just,
Right.
okay, we're done and now we got to wrap it up and do paperwork. It's everything. So
Yeah.
that's the system I think is pretty fascinating. And people will go, well, how do we do it? It'd be so hard to implement. Like, no, it's pretty easy and it's inexpensive because you need to pay some people, right? But you need some I think the cameras they're using are $80 each.
Right.
So maybe you have 4 stations with 2 people at each, and there's 80. I encourage everybody to go to that website and watch the
Right.
process because it's almost like an assembly line, but they get it
Mhm.
done. And what they're finding is that, well, I think if they have like senior citizens doing it or middle-aged
Mhm.
people, it takes like an hour and 10 minutes, but they have younger people, it's 50 minutes.
Well, I
I
was gonna
say
ask
it's
one
about an
question
hour.
because I always try to think of, I'm the okay, how are they gonna monkey this up?
Yep.
How are the people in Maricopa County gonna find a way to make this not work? So
Yeah.
let's say everything's good, we got our cameras. If the cameras don't work, then what?
Yeah.
Somehow
Yeah.
the
I mean, I
cameras don't
think,
work. What's the
well, I'm
backup
big on
system?
I think you need redundancy. You always do.
Yep.
So I'm the kind of person that you should always have backup cameras. You should always have backup people. You should probably hire more people than you need that day because people say, "Oh, I'm sick. My kids, whatever," and they can't show
Yeah.
up. So you really need redundancy. But we see that even now in our system. So, for example, when you go to the polls on election day, a lot like some of the polls were closed, the precincts, because
Yeah.
we thought we had volunteers. They called us last minute or they didn't show up, so we had to close this precinct down. And there's a sign there that says, "Go to this place." So you always need to build in redundancy,
Yeah.
but these are pretty
Right.
robust cameras. Like they're very
Mhm. Mhm.
simple. It's not like
Yeah.
a complex video camera
Right.
like we would know. It's
You're
not
right.
connected to,
Yeah.
it has no wireless in it. Like these are
Yeah.
very bare bones, but they're doing the job that you need. These little counting
Right.
machines, they're cheap, they're inexpensive. You can have backup for those and make sure you hire sufficient people. I would say I'm big on redundancy. So yeah, but it's so simplistic. It's
Yeah.
different than, like, for example, when I was poll observing the primaries, I got a call from a candidate and said, "You need to get over here. There's chaos here at Amex Ferry in Lexington
Right.
County." I'm like, okay. The machines were down.
Oh,
Like, how
wow.
can the machines be down?
Yeah.
Humidity. So, but then he also heard that it was because they didn't know what passwords to put in. So who knows? There were conflicting stories. The whole point was all the machines were down. The polls had just opened. There were a line of 50 to 100 people waiting to get in because they couldn't.
Jeez.
So
Couldn't vote. Yeah.
they had to switch to paper ballots because our law states that 10%, they always have 10% of the registered voters. They have paper ballots for those in case of this issue. There's an emergency.
Right. Okay.
So they get there, they get their paper ballots to start because they didn't want to back everybody up. Same problem happened. They go to vote for my bud, the guy, Jay Kilmartin, who was, running for a House seat. They said, "Jay, you're not on the ballot. We can't vote for you."
Huh.
Same Mike Covert issue because of the redistricting. And they
Yeah.
left. They left because they
Jeez.
wanted to vote for
No.
him. So
Yeah.
this is, these problems happen.
Yeah.
Where you go and there's an issue with the machine breaks down. Look at what happened in Arizona with the Kerry Lake thing. They had the wrong
Mhm. Yeah,
paper
exactly.
size.
Yeah. Purposely.
Well,
That was purposely.
hello. Yeah. Uh, and it wasn't being read properly. I mean, it's a very precise thing, and that's why they do logic
Right.
and accuracy testing
Mhm.
of the machines. They're supposed to have it for the right ballot size for the right situations, and they're supposed to test it for really the top load that you would expect. But
Right.
I think in our state they don't. they don't do large volumes. I think it's by law, it's only small volumes for logic and accuracy, which I don't understand. But you really
Right.
should be like. Here's another example. I went to watch the absentee ballots, which I really want to minimize those because once again,
Right.
those are our mail-in ballots, right?
Oh yeah, those are your mail-in. That's where the fraud comes in big time.
Yeah. So they had done a logic and they had done the testing on the machine, but they used flat ballots. Well, when you mail it in, you fold it.
Sure.
Okay. Well, they changed the size of the ballot to save money, I suppose. They changed the format of the absentee ballot.
Oh
And
no.
so when I was there to observe them, the tabulation of the absentee ballots, I was there for 3 hours and maybe they got 100 ballots done.
Yeah, because they couldn't. It was wrong size paper. It
It was
wasn't correct.
jamming.
Oh
It was
man, a
jamming, it was jamming,
nightmare.
it was jamming, it wasn't ready for it. It was I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a nightmare." I don't know how they ever counted those ballots. I finally left because I wasn't gonna be there till midnight, and I'm
Right.
presuming they fixed it, but I mean,
Right.
so
Right.
these things I
Maybe
mean,
they didn't.
machines have problems, computers have problems. That's why redundancy is important, but we gotta make it
Now,
simpler because
Laura, let me pause
think about it.
one quick second. That happened in South Carolina, the mail-in ballots. Now, folks, this is South Carolina. It's not Arizona. So for anybody who said
Mm.
our election was perfect in South Carolina, this is a great example of how it was anything but.
It's messy. It's just
But
messy.
we
It's
certainly, yeah,
complicated.
in Arizona, but still, yeah. Well, please continue. I'm sorry.
Mhm. No, I'm
So,
just my whole point is that, by it's just by design, this is so
mhm,
complicated now. Think of all the moving parts. We have all these machines, we have all these printers and computers and ballot marking devices and e-poll devices and people and flash drives
mhm,
and, you know, it's important that we maintain the chain of custody for all that. And another thing
mhm,
that we found when we were poll observing
mhm.
was missing tamper resistant and security seals from the machines. Well, I don't know if you guys saw the video in Arizona that came out, but they
Yeah,
actually
I
caught
did.
these people after the logic and accuracy test,
Mhm.
removing all the seals,
Yep.
taking
And
the flash
tampering.
drives out, reprogramming, and putting them back in. At least that's what it looks like,
Yep.
allegedly. And I'm not saying that that happened here in South Carolina,
Right.
but when you're a voter and you see security seals missing or tampered with,
Yeah.
that's not good.
Yeah.
That's
Well, let
bad.
me ask you a question. Laura, kind of walk us through, let's imagine we've had the day, the on-day election. Everybody's voted. Walk us through, as you understand it, what's the process after this flash drive come into play, and how are those votes then sent to, Columbia, wherever they're sent to be,
Yeah.
combined? Can you walk us through that as best you can?
Yeah, yeah. So the precinct, and of
Mhm.
course now we have early voting centers. But let's just assume it's all the precinct because that's another problem. The whole early voting center thing, really bad because it mixes up all the precincts. It makes it really hard to ascertain what happened. But let's say
Right.
it's election day. They're at the precinct. They finish up. They put the poll tape out there. Supposed to keep it out there for a little bit, and then which just gives you totals of the election. And then they wrap everything up, they take that flash drive, supposedly put it in a sealed, pouch or whatever, and then they return everything to the county. Once that flash drive then get now that flash drive has all the results in it, has all reports.
Mhm.
Actually, the cast vote record, which is a record of the person's selections, is right on that flash drive. Gets generated at the time it's scanned. It then gets put into a computer at the county level that has what's called electionware software, and it gets uploaded up to the electionware system. So then they can run certain reports or do whatever they need to do. They're basically so each precinct has a flash drive, and then they put
Mhm.
those flash drives in, they upload those. It takes a few seconds, but now they're getting all the they're consolidating all the precincts.
Mhm.
Then they take that information and they walk it over to another computer, which I believe is the election ENR, the election night reporting system. That is connected to the internet, and that gets supposedly secure, and that gets sent wirelessly
Mhm.
to the state and also to CITL. That's to CITL. That's connected to CITL, right? Which is
Mhm.
the reporting mechanism that we utilize in our state, and that then also gets sent out to the media outlets. So that's where the
Mhm.
reporting starts getting of the results, and God only knows what happens to it then. That's where it
Yeah,
gets to Edison and New
yeah.
York Times and all that. So
Yeah,
that
I
part
remember asking someone who was a poll manager who was adamant that there at no time was there any internet involvement. And we got a guest who jumped on in the comment section, and she just commented and said, "That's too many steps." And I
Amen.
agree, Jeanette. It's too many
Amen,
steps.
Jeanette.
Too many
Yeah.
steps means too many opportunities for mistakes, accidental. And so anyway, I was talking to this lady, and she said, "Oh, it's no, it's never connected to the internet." I said, "Well, let me ask this question." I said, "After you tabulate everything at your precinct, how does that information then get passed on to Columbia, to the state?" "Oh, we send it over the internet."
Mhm,
I just said,
mhm.
"Do you hear what you just said?" So you spend there's no internet, and then they tell me it's, "Well, we send it over the internet." So I'm like, I give up.
Well, there are a couple things I tell to people when they claim that. So even when you look at our system certificate, it has a server on there.
Mhm.
Server's connected to the internet.
Yeah.
Um, there's so many ways to infiltrate the
Net, but
system.
eventually it's going to be attached to the intranet. So
Yeah, I mean, a server is definitely
yeah.
connected. So there are a few things I always tell people to look at. Number one, our own website, scsafeelections.org. We have
Mhm.
white papers on there about the vulnerabilities, not only in the 2020 system we use, because we had a slightly different system then, but the system we use for the primaries. So we did, what was weird is our state bought these machines with Windows 7 when Windows 7 was already out of service.
Right.
We then upgraded it to Windows 10, so we got a slightly different version for our primaries, and we did that in, like, the spring and summer of 2021. Made no sense to me, like, why you would spend all that money to upgrade. Why don't you just buy them with Windows 10? But anyway, so we did one of our great, cyber geeks did an analysis of our systems and found hundreds of vulnerabilities in both of those systems. And he said, "Laura, you only need one." And many of those vulnerabilities weren't even known, like the viruses that he mentions weren't even known at the time. So that could have been working in the background. Now, the other place I like to tell people to go to is CISA, that CISA. That people that said this was the most secure election ever. They come up with vulnerability reports all the time on their website. And I believe it was May of last year, they came up with this huge report showing all the vulnerabilities. And it was right after our own borough put that system in. So that's another thing I like to refer to people as CISA. And the third one is this Haldeman report, which just came out yesterday, which was under seal for many, many years, which was interesting.
Right.
And he steps through all the ways that you can infiltrate these systems. You can do it easily with a flash drive. We have a video on our website by Mark Cook. He shows, and he was on, I think it was Conservative Podcast Daily, where he shows how you can flip votes with this. I mean, he does it in seconds. He does
Yeah.
it in seconds. And
Yep.
he said it's so easy. Like, he was able to get into the system. It wasn't password protective. He said there's back doors to the system. It was a mess. So it doesn't inspire confidence. And the thing is, if the potential's there, why do it?
Right.
So
Yeah. Absolutely. Jeanette asked a question. She said, "What's the issue with applying early voting votes to individual precincts?" Because you mentioned earlier that they're all kind of combined together. So how could that become problematic if you don't have the precincts kind of pulled out?
yeah, I don't like that. In fact, one of the things that they do, you're right, they're coalescing everything, so it makes it a lot easier to determine what was happening by precinct, and that's by design. Once again, they're making things fuzzy. So I don't like the
Mhm.
early voting centers. That's why I don't
Fuzzy
like
math.
early voting. You vote at your precinct. Thank you. We want to be
Right.
able to see the people that come in, know that they're from the precinct, and have some reliability there. One of the things that they're actually proposing with this hand count system for mockcountytx.us is that the absentee votes are sorted as they come in by precinct. You also take those and put them there, and they count the absentees as well for that
Right.
precinct
Mm,
by hand.
interesting.
So I love that. I love that. So you're getting rid of the machine tabulation at the county level. You're getting rid of the machine tabulation at the precinct level. We have to Our system in South Carolina is so centralized. The SEC is in charge of it all. We can't go to the counties and say, "Hey, you want to try hand counting?" because it's the SEC that's in charge of all elections in South Carolina. Now, the only place we could potentially do that is municipal elections, but they're trying to change that too, so that SEC is in charge of all. So that would be a great place to test the hand counting in South Carolina, the municipal elections. And in fact, sadly, Greenville just had a municipal election for mayor. And gosh, let me look this up because I was really kind of sad about this. They were saying that even though, Greenville, there are over 62,000 registered voters in the city of Greenville, and they had a mayor race in Greenville. And guess what the turnout was? They had about 3,500 people show up to vote out of 62,000.
That's terrible. Wow. That's
awful.
Disgusting. Yeah.
It's horrible. And then you complain about the people who you elect. What the heck?
Yeah.
I mean, people this is why I said, how do we fix this? You can't be an armchair warrior, right? You can't just sit here and go, okay, I'm all for that, but I'm not going to do anything. I'll wait till someone else does it. Like, listen, I'm one person, or my team, we're not huge. We're just trying to do the best we can. But we need more people to, number one, get involved in local level like you did. You ran for office. God bless you. Get involved. Go to your school board meetings. Go to your county council meetings. Get involved. Listen. Go watch the hearings at the legislature level. Make sure you're trying to stay up on things. Show up at the polls.
Yes, that's pivotally important. One of the things I would like to see is I would like to see the voting responsibilities returned to the lows to be, and our legislature just passed that on to the SEC. I'd like to see that come back, because then we can kind of hold them accountable. If something is done and it's not properly adjudicated, then we can take that out at the polls and say, you're out. You didn't follow through with investigating the accountability. There is none.
Where is the accountability right now with the election commission? Where?
Yeah. And Jeanette makes the point that there's not an election oversight committee. So there's nobody who can hold the commission accountable.
Amen, Jeanette, once again, because we're kind of acting as that grassroots wise. We're saying, hey guys, this was sloppy. Here's a report. We did. They ignore us, or they try to, they're fighting us so hard on this cast vote record. They're calling us election deniers. They're trying to claim more domestic terror. It's crazy.
I mean, I know. Yeah. And you know what's sad about that is I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not just the Democrats that are calling you Republican uniparty at work, because I've had many people within the Republican Party accuse me of trying to, I don't know, foment I don't know what they're trying to. But listen, I'm just saying, I don't care what your party affiliation is. If you don't believe in open and transparent elections, I got a problem with you.
That's right. And I would love to help anybody who runs, regardless of their party affiliation, to analyze their election to make sure it was not problematic. And because, once again, these election processes and procedures, they hurt the candidates, they hurt the people. We need to feel like we can trust, like, who wants to run if they feel like they're not going to get a fair shake? One of the interesting things I think that people don't realize, and maybe they're paying attention to it, I don't know, but actually more people than ever now believe that there's cheating in our elections. Rasmussen has done some interesting work here in their polling. 62% of likely voters believe cheating affected the 2020 election. And that poll was done in late April, early May, right? Now, in addition, a majority of voters suspect that our recent elections were affected by cheating. And they're saying that they believe the officials are ignoring the problem. And this is the biggest issue. They don't want to fix a system that benefits them. It's like the Incumbency Protection Act, right?
Yeah.
So, 60% of likely U.S. voters think it is likely that cheating affected the outcomes of some races in last year's midterm elections. That's according to Rasmussen. So we are not in the election deniers and people who just lack confidence in the system. We're not in the minority. Sorry, folks. We are the majority now. And that number is just increasing, increasing, increasing. And it's increasing with Democrats too. It's
Yeah.
across all parties. So this is why we need to fix the system. We cannot have legislators and election officials who just say talk to the hand and want to
Yeah.
ignore what the people are telling them. And this is the problem. This is going to be a growing issue and an uproar from the people if they don't fix it and do something about it. And
It's funny you should
unfortunately,
say that talk to the hand aspect, Laura, because our state chair for the SCGOP, Drew McKissick, was approached by a young lady, and she asked him, Mr. McKissick, what is your position? This is prior to his election, if you will. What is your position on the voting machines? And he was very hostile to her, and all but did the hand. And at one point in time, he actually tried to take her phone away from her because she was videoing his response. And he said, read the bill. Did you read the bill? And she said, well, I don't want to read the bill. I want to know what your position is. And he said, well, if you haven't read the bill, go read the bill and then come back and talk to me. She said, Mr. McKissick, I want your position. I don't want the bill's position. I want your position. And he ultimately said, well, the bill is my position. And I thought, Drew, that is a coward's way out. If that's true, if the bill is your position, then explain it that way. Say, well, my position is, according to the bill, it says XYZ, and best, most effective and safest way to, process the electoral votes when they come in, whatever the case may be. But you don't dismiss people. And that is what we see happening, not just with, with our state party leadership, but with some of our elected individuals, because I think you're absolutely right. They're comfortable because this is in office and it's what's keeping them in office. So they don't want to rock the boat, baby, because everything is smooth sailing from their side. But my concern is what you just talked about, the dismal turnout of voting in Greenville is going to be worse because people are not only frustrated,
they don't trust it.
They're just going to say, what's the point? I don't think my vote counts. I'm not even going to go vote. So if we think this is going to bring people to the polls, it's not going to happen. It's going to actually limit people because, as Jeanette said, that's how trust gets squashed. When a person in leadership refuses to answer the question, a simple question, Mr. McKissick, what is your position on the voting ES&S machines? If he is not capable of answering that question, then he shouldn't be in leadership. No one should. If there is an elected person who can't answer that question, they should not be in leadership. Period. Full stop.
Yeah, I agree with you, Shannon, completely. And what we're seeing is even worse. There's a trend right now, and it's across the nation, but it's also in our state, across agencies, of a complete lack of respect for the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act law, which is why we are suing. We are just saying, listen, we FOIA'd some information. You didn't give it to us. We believe it should be public. And we have it's been almost a year. We're going to probably spend close to $70,000 plus because we're just asking for information. And we're the bad guys now because we're asking for transparency. This is insane. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the fact, who should be suing? It should be our legislators. How come the Senate and the House are not suing our election commission saying you need to give these public records and make sure they're transparent? No, they make us do it. Little grassroots group. So, I mean, this is I'm fighting it, and I'll fight it to the end because every citizen in South Carolina deserves transparency in their elections. They deserve a better system, and they deserve, like you're saying, their elected officials to respect they don't care they don't care about us. It's not about we the people anymore.
They don't care. Yeah.
It's like we're in power. We will tell you what we're going to do. We make the rules. I mean, I don't know if you went to the Republican GOP convention, but that was kind of a cluster as well, making up the rules and trying to keep people's voices down and
suppressed. Yeah.
This is what we see in the legislature when we try to, we can't even get some good election bills out of subcommittee. They won't even address them. They won't even address them.
Yeah. It is extraordinarily frustrating. And what I want to say, and that's one of the reasons why John and I decided to do this podcast, because there are an infinite number of great national podcasts, but there are very little that focus on the state and local level. And that's where we really have to have people shine. You can prevent these men and women from getting into office at the local level. There's very limited opportunity for them to make it into the federal level. And who wants a guy? I mean, I hate to say this, but Drew's already at the national level. I mean, he's our state chair. and now he's the co-chair of the RNC. I don't want a person who tells you, read the bill. Answer the question, sir. You're the person running for office. You need to answer the question. And if you're not able to answer it, then you have the courage to say, I don't have a clear answer yet, but I will get back to you with the clear answer. And then follow up. Get back to that person. Don't dismiss people out of hand. And this idea that just because someone is using you, that you're afraid, well, again, that makes you a coward, and you're not very effective as a leader when you're a coward. So please step down and resign and don't run for office again. We've got to have people in office that we, the people, can hold accountable, which means if they don't do the job, we then show up to vote at the primaries, folks. Primaries are so critical.
So important stuff.
Vote in the put the right people on the ballot for the general election so that we actually have a valid choice of someone who's going to represent the people, not someone who's been in office for 20 years and feels like they're above it all and they don't care what we think. I mean, honestly, I just believe that there should be term limits at the state level as well as the federal level. People like Luke Rankin should long ago have been voted out. He's a Democrat running as a Republican. I think Heather Crawford should be voted out now because she's simply she's going to be in violation of the Hatch Act because she's a federal employee now, and she's also working as a state representative. So she's splitting her duties between District 7 congressional district as well as District 68, the state house district. So I don't know who's losing out on her time, whether it's the congressional folks for Russell Fry or whether it's the people from District 68. Somebody's losing out. And then you have individuals who've just been in office forever. And if you want to understand, again, I say this all the time, here's why you want to make sure you vote and pay attention to the local level. Tom Rice was a county council chair, became congressman here. We had to vote him out. Where did Russell Fry come from? Well, Russell Fry was a District 106 state representative. You look at Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham started off in the South Carolina legislature. Same thing with Tim Scott started out. So folks, if you don't want to have a Lindsey Graham make his way into the Senate, then make sure Lindsey Graham never makes his way into the state house or the state Senate. And then it doesn't happen. But that won't take place if you don't go out and vote. And I thank you so much, Laura, for what you're doing and what your group is doing. This is absolutely, it's pivotal that we take a stand. And I want folks to say, because I know suing and pushing forward with FOIA is not free. You're going to have to put forward the money and things to make that happen. Folks, this is so important that you get involved. Now, your organization is called South Carolina Safe Elections. Is that correct?
Yep. That's right. SC Safe Elections. Yep.
So if folks want to either get involved with on some of these FOIA attempts, what can they do to reach out and participate in this process?
Yeah, I would go to scsafe-elections.org, and our homepage right there has a button for our Give, Send, Go account. You can contribute for our lawsuit because it's a lot of money. And
give me that again,
scsafe-elections.org. And so there's you can join our Telegram channel there. You can contribute to our Give, Send, Go account for our lawsuit. We should be having a hearing in August. It's just, they've lawfared us so much. They've played games. The discovery process has been so long and arduous, and it's really sad. But, you know, we're going to win because we have a great case. And the only thing that they can say is these people bad. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter if I'm black or white. Doesn't matter if I'm Democrat or Republican. Doesn't matter if you like me or you don't like me. It doesn't matter what I'm going to be doing with the CVRs. So I've talked to about the CVRs. It's a public FOIA request. I'm a citizen of South Carolina.
Yep.
If there's no reason why you shouldn't be giving me that document, give me the darn document. What are you trying to hide? Like, I was talking to my son. He's like, Mom, they're pressing back so hard. Like, what are they trying to hide? I'm like, good question. I don't know. I just want to know how we want to be able to confirm that vote count was exactly what they reported. And we don't know that.
Now, some folks just joined in, so I want to explain to someone that missed a very important element that you mentioned earlier, because I was one of those people that said, well, you know, we do have a piece of paper that shows how we voted on it before that machine. Really critical point that I didn't even think about. Even though it may say Shannon Grady County Council, District 8, and I voted for myself, obviously, I have no idea if that barcode that is beside my name that's supposed to represent me, whether or not when I put it in that machine, if it actually put a vote in my name or else's name. Now, I'm not, it did. Please don't think I'm Shannon saying no, I'm not saying that. I'm just simply making the point. I have no way to verify. And there is at this point way to verify that the candidates listed on those ballots and the barcodes that go beside those names, if they actually match. We have no way of knowing that.
No, we're all they
And
give us
that
is
is
the
deep.
total. All they give us in their audits, the poll tapes, the scvotes.gov is the total final count.
Yeah.
We don't know. So what they found in Dr. Doherty is one of our expert witnesses, and one of the things that he found in his analysis, I believe it was of Pima County, was there were injections of votes every 1,000 votes. And what's
Wonder how that happened.
interesting, they had a whistleblower that actually
Yeah.
tipped them off to this and said, I was in a meeting with Democrats and they said, don't worry, we got this. We're going to put them in every 1,000 votes. We're going to inject, a certain amount. And
Yeah.
sure
3, 4,
enough,
or
when we
5.
looked at the cast vote record, this is what he found. So you don't know if the votes were front loaded, back loaded, spiked all the way through. If they're now what they're finding across, now this is kind of scary. The cast vote record
Sickening.
analysis that Jeff O'Donnell did of multiple counties across the United States showed a similar pattern, a predictable pattern that he found across counties, across states, and across equipment manufacturers. The same darn algorithm or pattern where you could look at the midpoint of the vote and you could calculate via the slope of the line, whatever
The
equation you
spike.
came
Yeah.
up with, exactly how it would end. And what Dr. Doherty always says, I love the quote, he says, fair elections are not predictable and
Well, thank you.
predictable elections are not fair.
Not fair. Absolutely. Fair elections are not predictable, and predictable elections are not fair. That is spot on. Oh my gosh, that is deeply concerning.
Mhm. So this is why
But
we want to look
we're
at the cast
terrorists,
vote records.
and we're election deniers, and shame on us, right?
Mhm. All
So
62% of Americans.
62%, and that's folks. That includes Democrats. We're not alone, and I assure you, if in this 2024 election Joe Biden doesn't win and there's a Republican elected, oh, they're going to swear it was they stole it, they cheated, so it's coming. So
And you
stand
know
by for
what?
that.
I'll work just as hard to look to see if there was any cheating or fraud. I mean, listen,
Right,
it's all about the system and if it's,
right.
clean.
So what steps have you been able to make here in South Carolina to get them to even consider doing paper ballots in lieu of the ES&S machines? And folks, again, if you just joined in, there's a great site. It's called
Mhm.
mock.org. Go there, or
.us.
.us. I'm sorry, it's not it's Mock Counties TX .us. Go there and take a look at it. They've actually done this in Texas, and then they've gone through how exactly to transition back to paper ballots. Ballots like we heard of in the up and talking about the stuffed ballot boxes that were happening. But this is a very carefully scrutinized system where essentially there are eyes on at all times, and you can actually replay the tape and go back and look at the ballots, make sure that they voted the way that was the outcome said they did. So anyway, that's important. So what step make here in South Carolina to bring that here? Because I guess
Well,
again, you can't go through the legislature, so you got to go through our South Carolina voting
Well,
STC.
there's a couple things. So I've been working with the legislators to draft and giving them ideas for bills. So we had three
Right.
election integrity bills, but they never made out of subcommittee. But one of those bills
Shocking.
had a hand counted paper ballot trial, like a pilot
Okay.
program. And so
Right.
that's what we wanted to do. We also had things like hand count audits where you're visually inspecting, the races. We wanted, more transparency with that. But what I would like to do is bring perhaps this RV to South Carolina to travel around to a few counties so that people can put their eyeballs on it and see for themselves and experience
Right.
it. Or come up with the system ourselves where we buy the equipment and we set up a little traveling roadshow, something like that. Right now, I'm so focused on the lawsuit. We got to get past like August, hopefully, is
Sure.
when our trial is going to be. And we'd like everybody to be involved. And I want everybody in that down at the courthouse, like involved because they got to know
Absolutely. Yeah.
so we want to motivate people to get down there and get that done. But and then we'll analyze the CVRs when we get them because I think positively. But yeah, we need to bring we need to show, hey, maybe the system isn't so perfect.
Mhm.
Whatever, for whatever reason, maybe it's just sloppy, maybe there's just negligence, maybe it's just maladministration, I don't know. Or maybe there's signs of
Mhm.
fraud. And
Right.
honestly, if I was the election director, I'd want to know if it looks like there
Right.
was an algorithm running, and I would want to say, okay, let's we gotta take care of this. But the fact that they don't even want to
Right.
delve
Yes.
into it is very concerning to me. So, but
Absolutely.
then you have to show them an alternate system. So I think just driving awareness of that. I do talks around the state. I'm going to talk about this tonight up in Indian Land. I I want to hopefully demonstrate this and get the word out about there's a system here that could work. But the bottom line is the SCC is going to have to buy into it. I think ultimately it's going to come from other states and our states, just like Eric. Like how many states left Eric, right? They said, okay, we're not doing the Eric system anymore. We are behind the eight ball because somebody's trying to protect that such system. Don't know
Right.
why, but eventually there's going to be like peer pressure or whatever to get out. I think that will happen eventually. Similar with the paper ballots. It's probably going to come from, who's tearing it up actually with paper ballots besides
Who's that?
Texas is Georgia.
Really?
Georgia.
Well, of course, Georgia
Yeah.
had their problems. So yeah, I'm glad to hear
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh, you watch Georgia. That's all I'm going to say is just
Yeah.
watch Georgia because they have a number of lawsuits. They have standing now because there was their Supreme Court actually came up with the fact that they do have standing, the people, because originally they said
You
they didn't
think?
in disputing. And so we also have a move to paper ballots in Georgia. We have this, Haldeman report that came out in Georgia. Georgia's going to be a very pivotal state. You also have an indictment coming up, an impending indictment for Trump in Georgia. Georgia's going to be hot. I think Arizona and Georgia are interesting places right now, but
Mhm.
Georgia even more so maybe than Arizona.
Well, that's interesting, and I'm excited that there are things being done. Do you know when in August the date is? Because I know there's a group of us who will do our best to be there and support you and let the folks know that this is an issue that we care about.
Yeah, not yet, but once I do, I will certainly let everybody know. So, get on our Telegram channel, join we have a Substack newsletter. You can
Yeah.
sign up for SC Safe Elections is on Substack. So we try to get the word out as best we can. And I want to thank you, Shannon, because it is so hard. You mentioned this earlier to get local media coverage.
Yeah.
The papers are captured. They're trying to do a hit
Absolutely.
piece right now on us. It's like they
Of
because
course.
why? Because the SEC sent them. The board, the
Absolutely, they
camera.
did, without a doubt. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So we need. It's sad, but journalism's kind of dying. It's kind of good
Mhm.
though because we need to
Yeah.
replace it with people like you. This is the
Yep,
new
citizen
media.
journalism. Yep. Yeah,
So
because they're not going to ask any of these questions. They're certainly not going to give you any amount. I mean, if you were lucky, you get 5 minutes. And things that even frustrated me when I love Tucker Carlson. He had a great show, and the fact that he's on Twitter now, I actually kind of enjoy it because his segments are 10 or 15 minutes, and it's focused on one subject. Where it seemed to be the platform has always been in television that they have block, B blocks, C blocks, D blocks. Individual that they're interviewing gets like 5 minutes to present their information because there's commercials and everything else. And I thought, when it's this important, can you not dedicate the entire show or at least a half hour to this individual? So
mhm.
that's one of the things that John and I really enjoy is that we get time to really
Go deep.
let you talk about what's going on. And I can't openly guarantee you an invitation because I'm not the chair, but I will absolutely. Jeanette's on here, and she is the vice chair of the HC GOP here in Horry County, and so I would love it if we could get you down in July. Situation trial comes up and have you speak to folks so that anybody who didn't catch this podcast can hear you firsthand and ask any other questions they have, and then we can put together how we're going to get there and how we're going to show support for you because I think there's a large group of people who are doing. And I personally thank you so much. And Jeanette just said we'd love to have you. So
Thank you,
I think it
Jeanette.
would be
I appreciate it.
fantastic to have you come and share some of this information because I don't know anybody that is actively voting that isn't concerned about what is going on in our voting system.
Yeah,
So I
and like you're
absolutely
saying,
would want to have you come speak.
it shows in the turnout. We only had like 17% turnout in our midterms. That's just, it's not
Dismal.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for coming on today and spending this hour with me. I don't know if you can hear in the background, but my cats are trying to
I
kill each
can.
other. So, but I look forward to talking with you again. And this is not going to be something that this is a one-off. We will have you back on again. And I know Jeanette's going to work to get you down here, and we'll put you up somewhere if you need to. Now, where are you based out of?
I'm out of Lexington County. So,
Okay, so it's not too
well,
far.
it's about 3 hours, I think.
Okay,
Yeah, 3 hours. But
okay.
we can either do that. We could do that probably right after even after
The court
the
case.
hearing, the court case.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I think then it could be very interesting to like just give people the debrief and then
what
kind of
happened?
where we go from
Here's the
there.
skinny.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
because
love
we're
it.
really
I love it.
busy going up to that. But yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank everybody for listening in and for your ongoing support and just continue to do all the work that you're doing because I know that we're all really busy on the local level trying to make things right.
Great. Well, folks, please like us so that there's other folks that you think would be interested in learning about how to transition back from electronic to paper ballots. Do that and check out SouthCarolinaSafeElections.org and see how you can get involved and how you can help them in this fight. Laura, we thank you so much. And folks, that's going to do it for the podcast today. And we'll see you next week. And John should be back. So we thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
As always, God bless, Godspeed. And folks, we'll see you next time.